One. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nerds of Legend. I am Ben. This is Brendan, and also not Brendan is here this week because why not? I mean, Joel. A couple of things. We're going to get started a little bit on our episode, but just a reminder: next week we're going to be doing the book, "The Picture of Dorian Gray" by Oscar Wilde.
Isn't it the portrait?
Portrait of Dorian Gray. My bad.
Joel will skewer us because this is picked.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing that. Other than that, we'll probably figure out what I believe actually will be into October. So we're going to be doing some spooky season cryptid episodes. We'll figure out what those are and get back to you next week on what we're going to start with. So with that, we're going to be talking about the Xenos factions of Warhammer 40k, and if we have time we'll talk about some mutants as well, but we're going to start with the Xenos and see where that takes us. We covered the legions for the last two episodes. They're pretty important, but obviously there's more to 40k than just the Marines and Chaos, so we decided let's talk some Xenos. So Brendan, where do you want to start?
Sure, Ben. So I've talked probably a little too much about the origins of the setting in general and how it's sort of this amalgamation of Foundation and Dune and Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné, and all this stuff is crammed together. So what ends up happening is you get these crazy, fantastic, wild science fiction ideas of aliens. But the very first idea of aliens in 40k, it's not necessarily fantastic. It's very simple. Your first idea of aliens in 40k are just fantasy races.
What?
Wog. Question mark Wog? Yes, Wog. Wog. The difference for years between orcs and space orcs was orc was spelled with a K instead of a C.
Yeah.
They both worshipped Gork and Mork. They both reproduced asexually as fungi, at least in this setting.
Well, so, isn't in fantasy versus 40k, aren't they the same species? Like the orcs in 40k crossed into the fantasy realm, and they're just like a thing.
They are the same. They're the same. They worship the same god. The only difference is they spell it with a K,
and they don't get guns.
Right. I don't know if they did that for like a cataloging thing so they don't mix them up or what, but yeah, they're essentially identical. And the reason why, if you go back far enough...
Well, wasn't there problems with the Tolkien estate at one point?
Quite the opposite. So what happened is Citadel had the license for Lord of the Rings miniatures. So I have, I've got Aragorn, and I've got some Dunedain Rangers, and I've got... I think Pippin, and so this is before the rights, the New Line Cinema rights for the films, because they had the Middle Earth like miniature game. But way before this, in the 80s, they had the rights from the Tolkien estate. Because remember, they were selling Dread minis from 2000 AD, and they were selling Gothic horror, and they had D&D licensing. So they just, more licenses, more chances for income. And so they had Lord of the Rings minis. So from that, Jez Goodwin was working on a variety of mini lines at the time. He was doing a lot of fantasy elves. So he did Scarlock's Elf Archers, and he was doing some other box sets. This is late 80s, mid to late 80s, I think 86 maybe. And what ends up happening is they're like, hey, we're coming up with a setting. It's... Because remember, Warhammer Fantasy Battle is established. We're making a game because we had the Dread license. We had all the Science Pie stuff. We're sculpting elves. If you go back far enough, they sold some stuff as just space elves.
Yeah.
And like Eldar, the term Eldar is taken from Tolkien. It's one of the names for the elves. So it's straight up ripped from Tolkien.
Yeah.
The squats are straight up space dwarves. I think at one point they were very briefly called space dwarves. Orcs are orcs. So it's quite.
And they probably initially were called space orcs.
Yeah,
if we're being
yeah,
honest.
yeah. So there are, I think the second Ed 40K Codex, I think is Codex. It might be. No, I think it's Orcs, but I think at one point they were the faction was Space Orcs before it was Orcs. So yeah, it was literally, hey, it's just that in space
With sci-fi bits.
with sci-fi bits. This is preceding the Chaos Source books. Tyranids are very, very obviously the xenomorphs from like H.R. Geiger's art and Ridley Scott's movies and James Cameron's sequel and that sort of thing. But at the very beginning, it's like, hey, we're sculpting this stuff. And what ends up happening is Jez Goodwin does some of the initial sketches and sculpts for the Eldar. And so you see them, they're wearing like chainmail and they have like gems on their armor, which is later explained canonically in the story. And when they have the helmets off, they're straight up got the pale skin, long ears, all that stuff. The squats, they have biker leather. They literally have like chopper bikes, like long, elongated chopper bikes, and they've got land trains, like Leviathan things that look like something a Jawa would own, you know. So a lot of it is, I wouldn't call it. It's referential. I wouldn't say it's plagiaristic at all. It's this wonderful melting pot of 80s goodness.
Yeah.
You start experimenting with weirdness once the idea of chaos is introduced, because the thing with the Eldar is, in Middle Earth, they precede man. They their influence, their light on Middle Earth is diminishing as we approach, as we're in the Third Age. Very, very similar setup in 40K. The Eldar rule for thousands of years. They have a homeworld. They live so long. We covered this a little bit earlier, I think, with the Traitor Legions. They live for so long that they become debaucherous and they live ostentatious lifestyles and they become lavish, and they're living so long they're getting bored with how to live. This causes the fall of the Eldar. For those who know about the ruinous powers, the big bad guys in 40K are the four Chaos Gods.
Yeah. There used to be only 3.
There used to be 3. I'm pretty sure Ben has an idea of how the fourth one comes about.
So, those of you not familiar, I think we did Chaos Gods before. There used to be 3 gods. You had Khorne, you had Nurgle, and you had Tzeentch. Basically the god of anger and war, the god of disease, decay, and entropy, and the god of knowledge and secrets. And treachery and blah, blah, blah. And then, because the Eldar got bored, they started doing what I've heard called murder fucking. And they murder fucked the god Slaanesh into existence, who is the god of lust and torture. I
love the question mark on the end.
So Slaanesh is with the birth of Slaanesh, what is it? 50% of the Eldar are instantly pulled into the warp and like tortured, and their souls are sucked out, right?
Yes. So what ends up happening is, because I've heard Slaanesh. It's usually British people who call it Slaanesh. We all know who we're talking about here. When this entity is created, it has this indelible link to the Eldar, because remember, Psyker energy, real space, where we live now, and the warp, this place, it's kind of like where Freddy Krueger lives, right?
Yeah.
It's the place where dreams are made real when they cross into real space.
Yeah.
So because Eldar have Psykers, and to be sentient is to generate ideas in the warp.
And actually, at that point, the realm of chaos wasn't a scary place.
Correct. So the warp, there was not a direct gateway between the warp and real space yet. So many elves, space elves, Eldar, projected debauchery and stuff you'd see in like Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2. So much ribald violence just mixing complete hedonistic pleasure and murder and all this stuff because they're living this long that they get that bored. It becomes real through the entity, which is Slaanesh. And because of this, there's this double link between Slaanesh and the Eldar. Slaanesh exists to consume Eldar souls.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is the Eldar flee in giant ships called craft worlds. So what ends up happening is the Eldar that live on the individual craft worlds end up creating their own societies. It's kind of like the vaults in Fallout.
Yeah.
There are differences societally and socially and personality-wise between the craft worlds.
And they basically figured out a way to like stem like keep from getting caught by Slaanesh, right? From getting like tracked, or they all find different ways of keeping her away.
There are different methods.
Him away.
That's the thing. Slaanesh is both all genders at once. A lot of Slaanesh iconography is both a flat chest and a breast, or like lots of bondage leather and pierced nipples and all sorts of like 80s hair metal kind of styling.
So Slaanesh is at all times he, she, and it, and them at the same time.
Pleasure and pain in equal measure. Complete abandon of temperance.
Literally Hellraiser.
pretty much. And so here's the thing. The Eldar are terrified of Slaanesh and Slaanesh's ability, because when they die in real space, when they die in the material plane, Slaanesh, their souls are like moths to a flame. Like Slaanesh and Slaanesh's adherents, dash towards their souls to consume their being forever. So the various methods with which the Eldar use to live in perpetuity are as follows. Number one, not only was the Eldar civilization ravaged, but so was their pantheon of deities. So I think only two deities are more or less continue to exist. Cain,
their god of war,
and vengeance, and then the laughing god, which is worshipped by the Harlequins.
So then three.
And then there is allegedly their goddess of like the harvest and
of life
and everything.
Yeah. The god of life and healing.
She is being held by Nurgle in his garden, I believe, in the warp as a prisoner.
Because she can't die, and she can constantly heal, so he can test out all of his nasty pestilences on her at all times.
Yes. So she's imprisoned. There are two at large that the Eldar still worship.
Yep.
There's another one. So we'll get to recent events. This is like 80s all the way through the 90s.
Yeah.
So the Harlequins live in the Webway, which is like space between
spaces.
It's the space between the warp and real space.
It's how they used to travel, it's how they traveled the universe. So they created the Webway, which is basically like hyperspace tunnels, if you want to think of it like Star Wars type thing. But yeah, sorry, I keep interrupting. But
no,
I know more about Xenos than I do about Marine factions. So
you're educated on the subject and you were excited, which is what we love. So what happens is the Harlequins, they are on this masquerade. They're basically a troupe of killer jesters.
Yep.
Who worship the laughing god, and they ride the Webway, and then there's the Black Library, which
they protect the Black Library.
Yes. So you may know the Black Library as the website or the store, the entity,
the place that makes all the books.
That makes all the books. It's their print house, right? It's a reference to the fact that there is a secret Webway library of knowledge that's hidden away. So the Harlequins use their reverence of the laughing god to avoid Slaanesh, and they hide in the Webway. The other thing you can do, which basically the craft worlds have an infinity circuit where all of the souls of the Eldar that belong to those craft worlds, when they die, they bring the body, and the soul is preserved in the infinity circuit.
Their souls because they have a soul stone, right?
They build soul stones. Whenever you see all the gems, there's like usually like a little gem like on the chest of Eldar minis, especially in the 80s and 90s. You see lots of little gems, but usually like big pronounced ones. That is a soul gem, a soul stone. Soul gem is Morrowind. I think they call them
wrong universe.
I think you call them soul stones in this one, or something similar. And what happens is when the Eldar dies, their soul leaves their corporeal
gets
body.
Sucked into the stone, so it can't go to the warp.
So sort of like marine apothecaries remove the progenoid glands from a dying marine so that they can pass it to a new marine.
Yeah.
The Eldar come by and they take the stone off of the corpse and they keep the Eldar's soul. Yeah. And that way Slaanesh doesn't get it. So what ends up happening is they have wraithbone, this dense hard material that this semi-organic, like bio-organic material that the craft worlds are made out of. They create like battle suits out of it called
Wraith Knights and
there's Wraith Guard, Wraith Knights.
Yeah.
Very early on, they had drones, like AI robots, and then they had like miniature. Like they were playing with basically ways to deal with a shortage of population.
Yeah.
And so what they do now is they take the soul stones and they place them in suits of armor, and there are warlocks and there are war seers, and there are different levels of psyker in Elder Society. And so they usually have, I think it's a Wraith Seer. They have an individual, a living individual who's a liaison between the Wraith Guard and the living and guides them into combat.
Farseers.
Yeah. And so there's various psychers in Elder Society. And so there are dedicated psychers that help the Wraith Guard into combat and guide these fallen souls into these silent, unmoving suits of armor that suddenly come to life when needed. Craftworld Iyanden, which is I think probably my favorite, was so ravaged by Tyranids, who we will later cover, that they have the largest amount of their forces on the craft world are Wraith Guard. And so whenever they are on maneuvers or stationed on the planet, it's very eerie because large amounts of their armies are silent, unmoving, immortal Wraith Guard until that moment in which they need to spring to action. They just sit there as long as they need to.
Yeah.
So the other thing, if we're not dead and our souls aren't exhibiting,
well, and then also the craft worlds, their thing is basically like, in order to keep Slaanesh away, they like pursue a life of like asceticism, right? So they're almost like do like a monk like lifestyle, right? So they'll pursue a craft and not pursue any sort of pleasure ever. So they become the best at whatever they do because they live for so long. So they'll pursue combat or they'll pursue an art or something, but it's like all about cleansing themselves of any like pleasure or pain or whatever. So they're trying to be like a Zen. They're basically Zen like elves. So they're Craft World Eldar are the closest to like Tolkien elves that you're going to find.
Desire is the root of all suffering, so they try to purge vice and excessive desire and emotion from them. That is why they're called craft worlds, because those Eldar that fled in the craft worlds follow a craft. And so what ends up happening is...
Yeah, essentially, Alex. They're basically Zen, like, warrior monks that all they do is, like, pursue a craft to, like, perfection. And they'll do it for hundreds and or thousands of years and until they, like, move on to the next thing. Yes, they are currently OP in the current meta.
For a long time they weren't, and then they were pretty good in 9th, and now they're very, very good. I don't mind because they are overdue.
Yeah.
So
no warp spiders though.
They have not made new warp spider miniatures since like 1998.
Yeah.
They got new Dark Reapers. They got new Shining Spears. Where are the warp spiders? Okay, so anyways, you may be wondering what are those. So every able-bodied individual in a craft world that has not followed a martial craft to the point of excellence is called a guardian, and they give them armor and they give them shuriken launchers that throw like little pieces of sharp metal at hyper.
They should throw shurikens at the warp speed.
Hyper speed.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when you follow a particular martial craft for centuries or thousands of years, you become an aspect warrior.
Yeah.
And so they have extremely, extremely skilled specialized infantry types called aspect warriors. So they have fire dragons, which have these massive lances, like anti-armor lances. They have dark reapers that are they have this emo iconography. I wouldn't say emo, but very like dour, and they're heavy weapon specialists. They have howling banshees, who have these screamer masks that emit high pitched wails. And
aren't they like super fast and stuff?
Super fast.
Yeah.
They have striking scorpions, which have chain swords, and they're other similarly close combats. Shining spears, who are mounted on jet bikes, and so they are.
And at the top of all of it, don't they have Phoenix Lords, right? They're like who lead the craft worlds.
Phoenix Lords are the elder analog to Primarchs.
Yeah,
roughly. So the Phoenix Lords are those that created the aspect warrior houses.
Yeah.
So they are very ancient Eldar that can go back to the fall, right? And so what ends up happening is they're the ones that said, hey, we have aesthetic lifestyles and we try not to have too much spicy food or watch too much TV or whatever, so Slaanesh doesn't meet us. We're the ones that created these various, you could call them martial arts, I guess, martial aspects. And so they're the ones that lead. So Morgan Ra,
he's the emo one, right?
He's the Phoenix Lord of the Dark Reapers, and I bring him up. There's Jane Czar, and there's Fugan, who's the he leads the fire dragons, and so I bring up Morgan Ra because he is so metal.
Isn't Jane Czar the one that they joke that that freaking Gilliman's got a thing with?
No. That's the Inari in the India. That's newer. That's newer. Jane Czar has like the weapon from Kroll, got like the shuriken thingy. But yeah, the reason I bring up Morgan Ra is first off, he's awesome, but his new mini is dope. But he was so metal that he went. His craft world was sucked in, because remember when Slaanesh was created, it created the warp.
Yeah.
So the eye
created the Eye of Terror, right?
The Eye of Terror. It created the bridge between the warp and real space called the Eye of Terror, which remember Arcadia used to guard next to it, and Abaddon and the Black Crusades come out of the Eye of Terror. So this terrible nightmare area where the warp is made real was created from Slaanesh's gestation. And so Morgan Ra's craft world had been sucked into the warp, thought to be lost. He's so metal, he went in, found them, and brought them out. So he found his craft world people, and for a long time they were considered lost, and they were canonically found and rescued. And so they're a very dour kind of stoic people because they lived in the warp.
Yeah.
So yeah, these Phoenix Lords are not to be underestimated. They can snap Marines in half with ease.
Yeah.
They're millennia old.
Yeah.
Exceptionally gifted. So we have craft worlds.
We've got Harlequins, which are kind of in the middle. They just like find everything hilarious and just like trying to avoid everything at all cost, and like honestly, they try and like change events from like beyond the curtain, because they're all about the whole everything in the world is a play that has as a story and a play that has to be played out. So they get involved in different Warhammer stories where they're like basically trying to influence events to make sure that the story unfolds. They love messing with Fabius Bile.
Yes, we have to maintain the narrative.
Yeah, it's like you got to stick to the story. You're the Phoenix Lord. Come on.
My personal favorite are the Exodites. The Exodites decided that the way that would
fantasy. I thought it was a fantasy thing.
No. They're exceptionally rare. There's not a lot of minis of them. The Exodites decided you're on the right track.
Okay.
That the way that they would deceive and avoid Slaanesh was to intentionally become Luddites and
revert to primalism.
Return to Monkey.
Return to Monkey.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, they famously call humans monkeys. Just monkey,
Shut up, Monkey.
They call us Monkey. So they live like Mad Max, or they live like Land of the Lost or Dinotopia, right? They intentionally technologically limit themselves to avoid pride and avarice.
Limit themselves to one world or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
they made an unreleased line of Eldar Exodites for Epic 40K, so 8mm. I have a few. I'm building up a collection. I would love to make an Eldar Exodite army. They're my favorite of the Eldar. So they're touched on in the books. Mm-hmm. They are very limited in miniature lines. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to find them.
Yeah,
but they do exist in the story. So
they're basically Dino Riders.
Yes, they are Dino Riders. It's Dinotopia with guns.
Yeah.
Like they have a Brontosaurus and they put like a giant gun on the back of it. Yeah. It's great.
They've got like they ride like Velociraptor, or they ride raptors into battle like they're horses, and they have like T-Rex like.
I was eight. They were awesome. They were elves with dinosaurs. I was like, sign me up.
And the final piece to the puzzle is the Drukhari.
Yes, the Dark Eldar.
Yes, they decided, well, Slaanesh is going to find us eventually, so the best way to keep Slaanesh away is to do all of the debauchery, because if we're feeding her, then at least she's not coming. She might not come for us as long as we keep feeding her, like, pleasure and pain in equal measure.
Yeah, basically, they're like, if we enact this suffering onto others, mm-hmm. that will please Slaanesh and we'll be safe.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the horror movie It Follows?
Yeah.
It's this idea that there's...
And this is where Hellraiser shows up.
But the horror movie It Follows, there's this sexually transmitted, basically ghost spirit aberration that mm-hmm. follows you once it's been passed you sexually, and it will not stop at 24/7. It will follow you at all times. If it reaches you, it will kill you. So you can run, you can hide... far as it just is unrelenting. It walks, it doesn't run, it just walks very slowly. It usually appears as people you know or as people that it has killed previously, mm-hmm. and it will follow you forever. It's a terrifying movie. The protagonist, it's inferred for some time, prolongs avoiding it by just having sex with other people because it passes its will to kill onto the last person. So she just has sex with a bunch of people and it follows up the chain of people to kill. So if she has enough sex and passes it on, in the beginning of the movie, she is given it by a douchebag who she meets, knows it's following him, and he gives it to her intentionally. So it's the same thing with the Dark Eldar. They are like, if we just enact enough pain and suffering and avarice unto others, we will pay it forward. We will kick this can down the road, and Slaanesh will not get to us.
Yeah. So they live in the Webway too, but they're on one
Kamarag, which is led by Asdrubal Vecht.
Yes.
Asdrubal
Vecht.
Yes. These Dark Eldar look like Hellraiser. They've got skin peeled, and they live for millennia, so they've like discovered ways of like flaying their own flesh and experimenting and stuff. And they're like, hey, if we create so much pain, Slaanesh will leave us alone. Or if we just learn to enact on others and we're so different, maybe Slaanesh is more interested in us. So it's straight up Hellraiser.
Yeah,
shit.
They have like 3 different types. They have like 3 different cults. They have the witches,
very similar to Dark Elf witches in Warhammer.
It's the one, the homunculi, and then there's a third one. I can't think of.
Yeah, the homunculi are the ones that create like body horror.
Yeah. So like you have the witches that basically like have arenas that they'll capture like strong warriors. So they'll capture like a really powerful space marine and put him in here and like basically torture him endlessly in battle. They have like basically as long as there's enough spectacle of pain. So like they'll have these gladiator matches where they just like beat the crap out of some guy to the point of like where he still doesn't die. And then you have the homunculi, who are basically like mad scientist dudes that will like basically turn like people into furniture. They'll capture, so like their favorite thing is to like go to a human world, capture a bunch of humans, and then like fuck off, and then like turn them into like torture slaves.
Turn them into Legos.
Yeah, turn them into furniture, and like they'll completely like they'll like floor their entire palace with human skin that's like got eyes and like mouths that are screaming because the humans that are made out of the skin are still alive, but it's just their skin.
It's gross.
It's gross. It's Hellraiser shit.
The final way to avoid Slaanesh, Eldar Rangers in the game are the representation of those who live out in the boonies. So if you're an outsider with the Eldar, if you leave a craft world, you decide that, hey, I don't want to learn how to like weave for 400 years, and I don't want to learn how to like use a chainsword for 2,000 years. I'm going to go do my own thing. Those are represented on the tabletop as the Eldar Rangers. So these are Eldar that learn to live on the outs. They're in the boonies.
They like go off exploring, right? A lot of times they're like snipers and stealthy and sneaky,
they've learned to live off the land, and so they're represented as excellent snipers, and they have stealth, and they're very difficult to detect in the game rules. But story-wise, they've learned to live on their own in the depths of the universe, living on the outs, so that Slaanesh will overlook them in the great scheme of things. And so
because a craft world is a juicier target than a lone guy.
Yes. Yeah. Slaanesh wants to drink those infinity circuits like a Capri Sun pouch.
Yeah.
And so their idea is, hey, I don't want to spend 2,000 years learning how to use a chainsword or weaving or being around a big juicy target. I'm going to do my own thing. And so the footnote is, I think 2017, 2018, around the advent of adding the Primaris Marines, you get the Aeneid and the Inari. And so the major advancement of the Eldar storyline is the fact that there are those who the Inari worship Aeneid, who is the Eldari god of death. And they believe that the infinity circuits, when every soul is in the infinity circuits, all the craft worlds will unite the entirety of the Eldar race into like a singular spirit. And that upon doing so, they think that the Eldari race will be reborn, similar to the fact that the Emperor is a perpetual. Because of the fact that the Eldar live on forever in a spiritual form, they think they will be reborn. And they think that Aeneid, the whispering god, the god of death, is still there and can still help them against Slaanesh. And this will be the final battle that defeats the curse of Slaanesh. Yeah. Now, the thing is, there are Eldar that think that's hogwash, or they think that's a load of phooey. The Inari, those who worship Aeneid, storyline-wise, you know that some entity is out there, because what ends up happening is an avatar of Aeneid is created. There are three major characters that are representations. So the Incarn is the avatar of Aeneid. Whenever you see tabletop avatars from the 90s, they're avatars of Cain. So there is a single avatar of Aeneid that's called the Incarn. There is... Now, you mentioned all the jokes about Rabute Gilman having a girlfriend. Yeah. Are about...
Because she's the one that like woke him up, I think, or something. There's an Eldar that woke him up because they like foresaw that he needs to in order for like chaos and stuff not to win. Isn't that?
Yes, absolutely. And so what ends up happening is they're called the Triumvirate of Aeneid. They're the three that are pushing the message of the Eldar god of death. The Vizarch, who it's rumored is a like reformed Dark Eldar. He's silent, never takes off his helmet. He's like this deadly fighter. There's the Incarn, which is the avatar of Aeneid, and then Yvraine, who was fighting in the gladiatorial pits of Kamarag, and I forget who kills her. Some named Dark Eldar badass like kills her, and upon like dying in the pits, is approached by Aeneid and is offered a choice: carry my message and save the Eldar people, or die. And she accepts this and becomes reborn. And so they are like the three adherents, messengers of Aeneid to spread this.
So it's like a death cult?
More or less. They're not going around murdering Eldar or anything.
Uh-huh.
They're just all saying, "Hey, join us.
Yeah.
If we can unify all the Eldar souls together into one, we can, you know." And not to mention, because there's an avatar, and because Yvrain was resurrected, and like they're essentially like biblically the apostles spreading the word because they were affected. So they're spreading this message amongst the Eldar. There are those amongst the Eldar who follow this and represent both their craft worlds and Aeneid. There are those that drop everything and just join the cause. Mm-hmm. So that's like the movement for the Eldar. They very famously.
So it's the thing that allows you to basically have an army where you can have every single type of Eldar unit in one army.
Well, not only that, but they show a limited control over death. Mm-hmm. Because the big thing is the big storyline thing is they resurrect the prince of. They resurrect one of the craft world princes of the craft world that's full of Wraithguard that I mentioned.
I can't remember.
Iandon.
Yeah.
The Prince Iandon. Prince Iriel is killed in combat, and he's named. He has his own miniature and that sort of thing. Prince Iriel is killed. The Triumvirate straight up resurrect him from the dead, and so a bunch of people are like, "Oh shit, this is real.
Might be legit."
Now, unfortunately, because everybody loves Space Marines, because we are human, so the Imperium of Man is the premier facet of the storyline. Ever since introducing the Triumvirate, not a lot has progressed from the storyline other than that. So that's where they've been left off for, I think, 2 or 3 years. Yeah. But that's where we are as up to right now. That's where the storyline is taking the Eldar.
It's a good time.
Lots of stuff.
Oh, we still have time. I feel like that's all the Eldar stuff. We've kind of hit the overview. Moving on.
We could cover the abhumans.
We could do that. We've done Orcs episode before. Unless someone says so. It's like, we've done the Orcs before. There's a whole Orc episode you can go back and watch. I feel like we hit all the notes on Orcs. I don't think we have to... as much as I would love to talk about Orcs again.
they need more named characters, and they need to have more of an influence in the story. What ends up happening is they'll have two factions fight, and then they'll be like, "Oh, the Orcs smelled blood in the water, and they came to Wog."
Yeah. There hasn't been like a big Orc. I guess Gaskell Throcket, like the book Gaskell Throcket came out recently, but like that was just like a reiteration of everything we knew already, just like put into like a full-on novel. So we haven't gotten a whole lot of Orc stuff.
The battle for Armageddon was the big Orc spotlight, but that has been revisited so many times.
Yeah.
They need some new blood with the Orcs.
They need some new. They could maybe do something with that one like Orc army that's like been like in like locked in with the Tyranids for like 20 years. So that's I feel like that's the one place is like what could happen is like the Orcs could like beat that Tyranid hive fleet and then come out and you've got this like unstoppable war boss.
Yeah, because I will
like that's like. That's the one thing I could think of that like they could do right now. It's like unless like I feel like Gaz's story is kind of like concluded for now. Like obviously there's more room for it, but like if they like have that like the Orc army beat that hive fleet back, and all of a sudden you have this like freaking like leader like war boss that's like led a war against the Tyranids and beaten back an entire hive fleet. He's going to be on, like, a level of, like, one of the freaking, the big six.
Yeah, for those at home, remember that it's heavily inferred that the Orcs were an engineered bioweapon made by the Old Ones, which is why they're so psychically receptive. Yeah. Which is why the Wog, their belief in something, creating it and making it come real, is so potent. Because they're this uncontrollable bioweapon, technically, that just reproduces asexually, and as long as it wants something as a group, it becomes real. Which is why if they defeat this hive fleet of Tyranids, because they will it to be so, and because it's like the Hulk always getting angry.
Yeah.
If this orc wog is
And
successful.
the more an orc fights and the more an orc crumps, the bigger he gets.
Right.
So
Bigger their teeth get,
yeah.
and so they may become 9.
So like at this point, like in the lore, Gazkul Thraka is like 40 feet tall because he's been juiced up so much by how many conflicts he's been in. But like you had the previous like way back, you had the beast, the arrival of the beast, who was an orc war boss that was like has been described as large as a mountain. I think.
So sort of like how like in storylines the purity of a vampire is diluted into modern days. There are more vampires.
Mm-hmm.
The original space orcs were space marines to people or superhuman. They were like super orc. They were like a higher evolved being because they were closer to the original bioweapons. They were like very early Dragon Ball Z when Goku turns under a full moon turns into a giant King Kong kind of thing. They were like a higher evolved form of being compared to modern orcs. If they had found some way to unlock their genealogy in defeating that,
because like that
would be really cool.
Yeah, because you have the 6. I can't remember what they're called. There's like the 6 like prime orcs. There we go.
Yeah,
that were like from like early 40K, where like basically those 6 orcs are like we've talked. Like I said, if you're lost, go back to our early orcs episode because it'll cover it. Basically, the 6 current clans of orcs that exist encompass are like embody the like those 6 prime orcs. So like the original Blood Axe, the original Bad Moon, the original Death Skull, Evil Sun, Goth, and
there's one more.
Free Buddha. No. Snake thing. Snake bite. Yeah, so like basically each of those prime orcs embody like what the psychic gestalt consciousness of each of these clans. And the most united the orcs have ever been has been under Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, who is basically like, I don't care what kind of orc you are, you're gonna follow me, because I'm the strongest one. So that's kind of like where we're at right now with orcs. They're big, they're green, they're mean. The more they fight, the more big they get, and the stronger they get. And as long as they don't get beat and their war boss doesn't die, they keep going. And at this point, Gazkul Thraka keeps coming back from the dead, so that's where the storyline's going.
They keep using the orcs as like a tertiary character in the story. They're like, oh, the battle's been going on so long, let's throw orcs in there. And
yeah, so, because it's like, oh, then everything turns to chaos. Not chaos big C, chaos just little c, because they just fuck everything up.
Yeah. The orcs were huge in the 90s. You had individual minis and varied lists for each clan, and you had a lot more variability with the minis. You had Gorka Morka. You had an entire game built around orcs fighting each other on a planet. And orcs were huge.
Yeah.
You had bombers over at the Big Tooth River. You had like a individual games just for orcs.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're sort of mid card if you think about it as a wrestling metaphor.
Yeah.
They deserve a push for them.
Honestly, their current like strongest lists are all snake bites, like the ones that like in the squig battle wagons and stuff with the squigosaurs and stuff.
Full speed freaks, evil sun armies where like it's all vehicles and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's orcs, Eldar. Remember the original release of Rogue Trader, the first edition rulebook, had Tyranids and references to Gene Stealer cults.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about them for a little bit.
Considering the box set, the
still unopened Leviathan box set that's sitting right there, and I know exactly where it is.
It's Space Marine Terminators versus the brand new 10th Ed Tyranids. Tyranids were also huge in the 90s. Space Hulk was extremely popular.
Yeah.
They were very popular in Epic as well because you had Bio Titans. They're essentially xenomorphs.
So if you look at Tyranids, which are probably like after Chaos are probably the greatest threat that exists to the galaxy. They are a near omnipresent threat of bug aliens that just want to consume everything. Every planet they come across gets withered down to bedrock, and all new organic material is stripped from it. All water is taken. All soil is recovered, and
Everything.
basically the planet is dead after a Tyranid Hive fleet has arrived upon it. They're big. They're scary. They're a hive mind. And no, like they used to be thought of as just like these like bug aliens that show up and eat everything, like almost like a locust. And then the Empire finally figured out, oh shit, there's an intelligence behind all this. So they can basically they constantly evolve to like whatever threat they're facing. So every time they like get beaten back, they can come back with a solution to whatever threat they were facing before. There's only a few things that they haven't been able to beat, but like that's still where the storyline is. It's definitely where the current storyline is headed in terms of like what the big bad evil threat is.
They have fast evolutionary turnaround.
Yeah.
They if you've seen Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers, similar to that concept. Now the thing is, the Tyranids do not have the ability to travel other than like sublight.
Yeah.
So they can't make jumps.
Mm-hmm.
They can't jump across but into the warp and then back into real space like Imperium ships can. They have to take the long way. They have to just drift across the universe. Yeah. And the thing is, to accommodate that, remember that there are psychically evolved Tyranids because there are hive minds that send out suggestions to the smaller ones. So they figured out at some point how to send suggestions to sentient species. Mm-hmm. And that is how you have gene stealer cults.
Yep.
So there are cells of individuals who worship Nurgle and who start worshiping ruinous powers. However,
they sent out these outriders.
Yes, they're
like
those
they like blasted these like little like individual like gene stealer aliens like out into the galaxy, and they land on planets or on ships, and like you wouldn't even notice they hit because it's just literally like a person in an egg. So it's like a 6-foot-long object just like crashes into your ship. You don't even know that it just like found its way in. And they take over. They'll basically this happens over generations of human life, where they'll take over. They'll basically steal the genetic material of a human, turn it into like a basically like slave to them, and then that person basically they'll retreat into like the depths of whatever planet they're on. And over the course of generations, they eventually are like these aliens that look human, but they might have some different like they might have a third arm, or they might have like I don't know, bug eyes or whatever.
They introduce so much human DNA gradually into generations. They create hybrids that can better infiltrate society. Yeah. So hive worlds, like massive industrial planets full of billions of people, are especially susceptible to gene stealer cults. You'll see them basically like Necromunda. So any planet with billions upon billions of people where it's easy to get lost or to be unnoticed, you'll get large cults of Nurgle. You get large cults of gene stealer worshippers. Mm-hmm. And what happens is they can send psychic suggestion ahead of time if a hive fleet is coming, and they basically become a fifth element.
Yeah.
They become guerrillas, forward agents for this eventual wave.
Yeah. So they'll basically like prepare a planet over these generations, and then all of a sudden like basically take over a planet and be like, "Here, hive fleet." It's like, "Here, Dad. come and see what I did for you. And then the Tyranid Hive Fleet is like, I don't care about you, but thanks for the planet, and then eats them and everything else on the planet. But they think it's like Dad coming home to save them, and it's not. Which is what's sad about the Gene Stealer cults, because they think they're bringing in like their sort of messiah to like save them, and then the Tyranids don't give a fuck. They're just like, I'm eating you too. So
you are biomatter. I guess the individual Tyranid strains I think are the allure that a lot of people have to playing the faction. So you have the Gene Stealers that have 4 arms of razor sharp claws, and they run forward and rend everything apart. They're the primary bad guy in Space Hulk, which is the board game of Space Marine Terminators trapped on a big old ship with them. There's the Termagants, the little ones that have prehensile digits so they can hold guns. So they have these disgusting bio guns
that are like literally just attached to them, and it just like spurts acid.
They have acid or spines, or I think there's different strains of weapon you can get the Termagants. There's the Lictor, which there's the there's so many. There's the Zoanthrope.
Hormagaunts and Zoanthropes, and so like we're not going to get on all the different like types of Tyranids because there's too many. Because they don't really have a lot of named characters. They just have a lot of different unit types.
Yes. And so because of this, you can sort of recognize, hey, it kind of limits the faction in terms of popularity because they can't write, they can write books about like a Hive Fleet invasion or whatever, but you can't sell like, you can't sell action.
You can't sell a book like the book about a Tyranid like Hive General the way you can sell a book about like Gazkul. Or like a Phoenix Lord, or
there's no individual characters that you can focus on to grow the fandom for the particular faction. The idea of aliens movies and of these massive waves of bugs and all the cool strains, I think, is the allure of Tyranid.
Well, even they're like named like characters. It's like they have one like actually named character, and it's Old One Eye, and then everything else is just Broodmother or like I can't even think of. There's like a hive master or something like that. There's a Broodmother. There's a Old One Eye, and then there's like a Scythe Master or Hive Master or something like that. Hive Lord. Yeah.
All of their names are created with adjectives.
Yeah.
It's not like old Billy Tyranid. No, however, they are making a comeback with a vengeance. They are the primary antagonist in Space Marine 2. Which everyone's very excited for. They're the primary opposing faction in the new 10th box set.
Yeah. They won.
They won the event. There was an event based on everyone would play, and then you report who won the battles, and the Tyranids actually won the event.
They beat the Space Marines.
Which is actually exciting because Space Marines always win everything. So I'm like, this is actually pretty cool. So if you're interested in Tyranids, this is the perfect time to get back into them.
They're bug aliens. All of their weapons are like bone blades and like acid spitters and or they shoot like scarabs at people that burrow into your flesh or like larvae at people that like eats into you, and they're really interesting. They're wild. But again, like not a lot lore happens wise. The coolest thing about them is like how they take over a world and like eat it. So like basically like when a Hive Fleet first arrives, it's preceded by like basically everything around the world that's about to be overtaken is like are cut off from the warp, because the warp presence of the Tyranids basically deafens and like all you can hear is a psychic scream basically of these Tyranids that are like running towards you or flying towards you. They're preceded by like a sort of set of like spores that land on the planet and then eventually start turning the biosphere of the planet against the inhabitants. So it starts like infecting people and like their ocean. It turns their oceans into like stomach acid, that then like basically like they turns their oceans and lakes into digester pits for the Tyranid hive fleet. That like the Tyranids when they land start like chucking all biomatter into that is then sucked up by like these giant like horrible like bio straws that are struded by the hive fleet, or no, they grow up from the planet's surface.
So describing it is so gross.
Yeah, it's like basically it's like if you think about it, like if you're on a hive world or a Tyranid hive, a world being in like everything basically turns into biomatter that is like pulsating and like stomach acid, and everything's trying to kill you. You eventually can't even like breathe unassisted, like without like an air supply, because it becomes poisonous to all organic life except Tyranids, and then they suck it all up, and then it's just basically the planet is now bedrock. No water, no air, no life, anything. And then they suck it up, and then they move on to the next planet. So, yeah. Kind of scary, kind of an existential threat. It's all fun and games until the Tyranids show up. So that's the Tyranids. Well, I guess the next one we can talk about. You want to do Necrons or the Tau? Necrons could almost be their own episode.
Yeah, Necrons are getting more and more focused on and involved, and like a lot of retcons involve them. Necrons are like the opposite of Tyranids, where they keep getting named characters and they keep getting origins, and their fingers are in everybody's pies. I feel like we could focus on them for an episode. Tau.
Tau is a relatively new faction.
Yes, so Tau came around like the year 2000. Their first big video game was Fire Warrior, so maybe like 2002, 2001. They're the second newest faction other than the Leagues of Votann. For the longest time, they had so many haters in the 40k community. I think it's still fashionable for guys in their 30s to hate on the Tau.
Yeah.
Like,
because did they come in and they were just like so good that it made people angry or something?
For the greater good, so it's like you guys are too positive for the setting. And
it's argued that they're like the only good. A lot of Tau players argue that they're the only good faction in 40k, like because everything else is evil.
They're a young species.
Yeah.
They have air, fire, like the elements. They have castes.
Yeah.
Based on the castes, you have different positions in their society. So fire caste are their
warriors.
Infantry, air caste fly and that sort of thing. They have ethereals who are their ruling caste.
Yeah. So they're this race that was it's interesting in their development because they showed was it a rogue trader fleet found them? I
believe so. They're blue and hairless, and they have like a slit in their foreheads.
Yeah. So the rogue there's a rogue trader fleet that found a inhabited Xeno planet, and it was just deemed not like worth like doing anything about because it was just a bunch of blue aliens that were like banging rock. They were basically still Neolithic at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they showed up. I don't know how much later. 1,000 years, 10,000 years. It was in a very short amount of time. The next time the Empire came across them, this Neolithic species had become to the point where they'd like basically carved out an empire for themselves of multiple planets, where they had like conquered other races and uplifted them instead of doing a purge like the empires want to do. And like entered them into their society for the greater good. Yeah.
So the big thing to take away from the Tau is they don't exterminate; they diversify. So they're the Vespid.
Assimilate.
Yes. Well, I mean, not like Borg though. They're like, hey, want to sign up for a timeshare?
it's assimilate.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Like, they proliferated as...
Hey, we're going to give you guns and weapons and armor and stuff and let you, like, explore the universe, but you have to worship us and do whatever we tell you.
Well, worship the greater good. So, like, the Vespid are insectoids that serve the Tau. Was it Guela or, like, Guevasa is the term for humans that actually follow the Tau? So there are human colonies that
They get like contacted by the Tau, and they're like, actually, this doesn't sound so bad. It's a lot better than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, so they straight up follow the Tau. The Tau are extraordinarily technologically advanced. They have very, very sophisticated naval fleets. Battlefleet Gothic.
Isn't the only thing that's different is they have no presence in the warp, right? Or very limited presence.
Yeah. That I'm so excited for the day that the Tau fall to Chaos, because like they have no.
It's gonna be interesting.
They have no affiliation with Chaos.
Yeah.
They have no presence in the warp yet. They're so like on the outs of the universe.
But they fought Chaos.
They have fought Chaos. So it'd be really interesting to see like if they're tempted by it and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Battlefield Gothic, their ships have singular purposes.
You forgot about your favorite Tau faction.
The Kroot. I was going to get to that. I will get to the Kroot. But the idea is it's a very socialist idea that everybody contributes to this cause, because like their ships each have a single job, and all of the ships together help you win your objective. In Epic 40K, they have hammerheads, they have transports, and they have stealth suits and drones. They have this withering long-range firepower that is their specialty. And my favorite of the auxiliary aliens that follow the Tau are the Kroot.
Which is like their warriors, sort of like frontline warrior guys, kind of.
Yeah, so the Kroot are this avian...
dinosaur.
Bird dinosaur, because birds became dinosaurs. So they're like this bird dinosaur Native American tribes. Yeah. And they are led by shapers, who are basically their shamans that tell them what's safe to eat, because the Kroot, when they eat, break down the genetic material of their quarry and then digest and assimilate beneficial DNA into their genomes. And so the shapers actually tell them, hey, that this is safe to eat, this is not safe to eat.
Yeah, because they're wanting to keep like, oh, this is what we should like. This is like what we should be aspiring to, or whatever. Like, oh, you're a warrior. You need to be like stronger and better and faster. So you do this one, or you're a crafter, so you need to do this thing, so you get smarter or whatever.
Yeah, and what happens is over time they start to acclimate to the biome they're in. From the genetic material they've been consuming. Now, naturally, the shapers have certain rules over stuff that's completely forbidden. So because of the fact that the Tau saved them from extinction, any Kroot caught eating Tau is executed on sight. You cannot eat Tau. You cannot eat anything tainted by chaos. So the Kroot are like, that's a terrible idea. I believe it's frowned upon to eat Tyranids. Yeah. Because of the corruptive influence that could happen.
But yeah, so you'll get inserted into the hive mind or whatever, right?
Yeah. So you don't want to accidentally have a second voice in there telling you what to do. Yeah. You don't want a third tentacle for Yeah. My arms are for me, and this tentacle is for Nurgle. You don't want any of that. And Tau saved them. So
also, are orcs a no-no, or is that just in Gaz?
So in the
because it's Makari.
In the book, there's a Kroot that the Imperium capture that
has eaten an ethereal.
Yeah, a mad scientist that was just eating genetic material that was banned. And what happened is they fed this Kroot Mercari's flesh, because Mercari keeps coming back, because Ghazghkull wills Mercari back with massive psyker energy.
Because isn't it's because it's similar? They also are like similar to Space Marines, and how Space Marines can like absorb memories and stuff from like eating flesh. So it's like the Kroot's ability like actually gives them the ability to like see someone's memories and stuff like that.
Yeah. The thing with the Kroot is it also actively rewrites their DNA. So what ends up happening is the Kroot in the book that we actually reviewed eats Mercari's flesh. Mercari cannot die because Ghazghkull's like, you come back. And so the Kroot actually like violently dies.
Yeah, basically it just like turns into like fungus paste instantly.
The regenerative tissue completely overloads the Kroot, kills them. They have war spheres, so they actually have spacefaring craft. I believe they don't remember how they were made. I think it was like their society a long time ago or something like that. Yeah, they have just like the last of the Mohicans. They have like blades on the butts of their space muskets, and they have Kroot hounds that. They have Kroot DNA, but they basically spliced into their dogs.
Uh-huh.
They have Krootoks that are like Kroot rhinos or Kroot steeds, basically.
Uh-huh.
Because remember, what ends up happening is their DNA is getting diversified, so they end up having associated species that they have say over.
Like their planet follows the same rules that the Kroot go by, basically.
Yeah, so it's sort of like if you've seen Predators, there's like the Predator hounds and stuff. They're very similar. So they have Krootoks that they ride, and they have Kroot hounds. And they have like bladed big like lever. They kind of look like lever action space guns, and they're just generally very cool.
And at the top of Tau society, you have the ethereals, which are like basically the blue vagina forehead space aliens. Oops, I said that out loud. They have a weird like slit in the middle of their forehead that everyone jokes about. Looks like a vagina.
It looks bad.
Which are like psychically gifted, and so like the thing that like, so yes, the Tau are not like instantly hostile to like, contrary to any other Xenos you encounter in the Imperium, the Tau aren't like instantly hostile. They just want you to like embrace the greater good. But what's weird about it is as soon as a Tau shows up on a planet, everyone starts talking about how great the greater good is. So there's it's not been confirmed yet, but it's believed they either have like a psychic presence or some kind of like pheromonic thing that like gets everyone around them to agree with doing what the ethereals say. Because their society is very stratified of the Tau are at the top, the ethereals are at the top, who are like the OG Tau, and then everybody else serves the ethereals. And they have a very stratified society.
Yeah, the longer the Tau have been in the game, the more nuanced they become and the more interesting they are to me. I feel
because it's implied that they rob people of their free will by basically like brainwashing or like slowly convincing people that their way is the best way via like either psychic thing or pheromones or some other type of control. So it's a little bit nefarious. So like they have this whole thing where like they're so like everything is good with them because it's for the greater good, but at the same time you're like, what's actually going on here?
Which is why they want to kill Commander Shadow Sun.
Yeah, because he's like, fuck this. I thought it was Commander Farsight.
Was it Farsight? Oh, I think it might have been. Here, let me look.
Shadow Sun's one of his like subordinates, I think.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Because it's the Farsight Enclave.
It is Farsight. Yeah. What ends up happening is you start getting this political intrigue with there's like caste politics and classism and stuff, and so Farsight isn't an ethereal.
Yeah.
But has opinions that.
Well, he's the lower caste. He's not. Yeah. It's not that he's not an ethereal. He's a Tau, but he's not one of the like high caste ethereals.
He's not an ethereal and has opinions about how things should be done.
Yeah, because he's one of their greatest generals that has ever lived. And then he's like, "Hey, how about we stop doing this whole caste thing because that doesn't seem very greater good of you." And they're like, they basically pull a Imperium of Man and go, heretic! And he's like, all right, well, these 6 planets are mine, come and take him. And they can't because he's too good.
So now we're starting to see Civil War intrigue with the Tau. And then Farsight almost like had a near-death experience.
There's a chaos incursion.
And they thought that Farsight died, but miraculously did not. Mm-hmm. And so now there are people starting to like worship and stuff, and so the girls are like, this is no good.
Yeah, this is bad. This is not the greater good.
This is not greater good right now.
Yeah. What's interesting is there's an early one of the first Caiaphas Cain book is a Tau. There's a Tau embassy on the planet that Caiaphas comes to, and he works with them a little bit. But it turns out that the Tau are susceptible to gene stealer cults, which is fun. Yeah.
But their vehicles are really cool. They have large vehicle and battle suit.
Yeah, so they're different from a lot of the other factions. They get accused of being a weeaboo faction.
There's a common complaint that they look too similar to Gundam.
Yeah,
giant Japanese robots, and that their society is vaguely Asiatic in nature, and they're good guys, so they don't belong in the setting. And it's kind of like, guys, this setting is just not plagiarized, but just heavily influenced from other science fiction properties.
So why are you complaining that? So you're not gonna, if you're not gonna complain that the Adeptus Mechanicus is directly ripped from Foundation, why are we complaining that the Tower Gundams?
I found a lot of people that complain haven't done their homework and just want something to hate.
Yeah,
which
they got mad because they got spanked by some Tau. They're mad because they lost to Tau too many times, even though it was a brand new faction. So they're like, "Oh well, they're just Gundams.
I get.
They don't even get into melee range."
Yeah. Don't put your Tau melee. Hating on the Tau is very in 40K appropriate, but no one.
I feel like it's like. I feel like it's dropped.
Imperium a man to be real. Nobody, you should not unironically.
Well, some people do, and that's
some people do.
Those people are to be avoided at all costs.
It was such a problem that Games Workshop had to address it publicly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So I mean, maybe you're just really motivated to be in character, but like a lot of people buy Tau. They make a lot of money for the company that you support. Mm-hmm. And guess what? If you don't like the way they play on the tabletop, it's a very large universe, and they are really fun and not OP in Gothic.
And there's not that many people who play them, so shut the fuck up, Blueberries.
Yeah. They're fun and epic. They're fun in Gothic. They have very varied play styles across the games that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
More factions, more people play the hobby. You want that to happen.
All right. Well, it's 6:00. I think we could get through Necrons.
If we're quick.
Yeah. So the Necrons, the final... I think that's the last Xenos faction. I think that's all of them, right?
I'm not counting Chaos, and Abhumans are arguably...
All right, so you got the Heretic, you got the Xenos, and you got the Mutant. I feel like this is the last Xenos faction.
Yeah, we'll put Abhumans under.
We'll do Mutants another time.
Yes.
So, Necrons. Do you like Egypt? Do you like tombs?
Yeah, do you like tombs?
Do you like Egyptian iconography? Well, Necrons is the faction for you, because these aliens are probably even older than the Eldar. I would say.
Yep, they're the oldest.
They're like from the beginning of time, and they came up on a planet that was ravaged by solar radiation, where the life expectancy of someone that lived on this planet was like 25. Yeah. So they'd basically live for like 25 years and die of horrible space cancer. Because their planet was so irradiated. And then you have these guys called the Catan, which are like sort of like proto-gods. Old ones. They're like from like before like anything else. This is even pre-Imperium of Man anything. So the Necrons, they're like, hey, if you join with us, we'll give you a way to not die ever. And the Necrons are like, sounds good to me, because I would love to not die an agonizing cancer death. And so they basically had this, like, basically a lot of the Necrons had sort of like a death cult thing going on, because, you know, when you die, but like when your life expectancy is like 25, it's like the only thing you're worried about is like staving off death for another day. So they're similar, and like as we talked about in a lot of 40K factions, there's a lot of like stuff going on where they're like cribbing from other for when they have a faction idea, they crib from some other thing. For the Necrons in particular, they cribbed from like Egyptian iconography, and like so everything's got like scarabs on it. It's got like all their names end in kh, and they
Lots
like
of consonants and apostrophes.
they like pyramids and like what are the like monoliths and stuff, which is very Egyptian, you know. And so basically what happens is the Catan, they were not nice people, and they tricked these Necrons into basically like having their souls ripped from their bodies and put into robots that are made of living metal.
They did
and it is not a nice process to go through.
They did not read the terms and conditions.
Yes, they were like, all right, yes, anything to get us out of this agony. So they then, the Catan were like, all right, that's our part of the agreement. Now you have to go fight anyone that we tell you to go fight. And so like the Necrons, they go off and go fight everything they're told to fight. But the problem is, like every time like one of them dies, they like lose a bit of themselves. So like all of these like the low level like peasant Necrons eventually turn into like basically like literally robots. It's kind of like the Cybermen.
Mindless drones.
Like mindless drones that have to be controlled by basically the only things that retain their personality are like the high ranking like monarch class of the Necrons, so the ones that lead the armies. So they have these pharaohs that then order their generals and commanders around to like order these like little like drones to like do their jobs.
Yeah.
And then after all of this, after their job's done, the Catans are like, all right, thanks for taking care of that. See you later. And the problem is that eventually you live for long enough as a robot, you kind of start going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you start losing cognition. And
yeah. So like these drones, there's a lot of people that they have this like, so they're like, all right, we're gonna like they've taken over the whole galaxy, and then they're like, we're gonna go to sleep for a while. After all this other shit, because like their whole like thing where they took over the galaxy plunges the rest of the galaxy into chaos. They're like, all right, we're gonna wait, and we'll wake up when things get back to normal again. So then they sequester themselves into these tomb worlds and go into stasis and wait until like
millions of years.
So basically like there's an early like Necron dude who like went to Earth 65 million years ago, and he's like called like the Collector or whatever. And he just like, I want a T-Rex.
Is this Trazyn?
Trazyn the Infinite.
Trazyn the Infinite? Yeah. Everybody loves Trazyn, by the way.
Trazyn, because Trazyn's awesome. Come on.
Everybody loves Trazyn.
If Necrons sound interesting to you, go read the Infinite and Divine, because it's hilarious. Because there's like Trazyn the Infinite who decides that his big thing, he like wakes up early and decides his thing that he needs to do is to catalog the entire galaxy so that it's like preserved for the future. Like he doesn't care like whether you're Necron, whatever. He's like, everything needs to be preserved because it's important. Because a lot of these Necrons, they come back alive and they like end up with certain psychoses. Yeah. So he's like, he wakes up and then he's like fighting with his buddy, the Diviner. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
I can't think of the other guy's name, but he's basically like OG Necron. Is like anything else other than finding like our origin and preserving Necron stuff is heresy. And
is it Orican?
Orican the Diviner.
Orican the Diviner.
Yeah.
Trazyn the Infinite, Orican the Diviner.
Yeah, and it's basically it's almost like a freaking like Oral and Hardy skit, because they hate each other, but they're like fighting for dominance over this one thing, and then they're trying to open this one ancient Catan vault, and then at the end of that, they open the Catan vault and immediately scream and shut it again. They basically orchestrated the destruction of a planet so they could open this vault over millions of years, because it only opens up every like 10 million years or something like that.
Yeah. The big thing to remember is the Necron eventually overthrow the Catan, and so they seal them into the, not the monoliths, or is it they get back at their masters. And their adherents, all of their followers, they put to sleep until they're needed. So anytime you're writing story work for like a new edition or something, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, hey, this planet, there are Necrons sleeping there, and it'll be written in. Or like the Emperor, like, oh, hey, he was working in a secret project, and it was Necron tech, and so they retcon Necron stuff into the Horus Heresy and stuff like that.
Yeah, because like that's the thing, is like there's these Necron tomb worlds that are implanted throughout the galaxy, because they bury their tombs like way, way, way deep, and because they basically ravage the whole galaxy in their attempt to like. I think it's also like suggested they might have been like fighting the Krorks at one time.
They were either fighting the Krorks, or they were both enslaved by the old ones. And so perhaps the Catan used them to try to get rid of the Necrons.
So they're like, all right, we're just gonna wait for all the, like, they ravaged the entire galaxy, like wiped out like half of everything, and they're like, all right, we're gonna wait for everything to go back to being paradise worlds. We're gonna go to sleep deep under the Earth's crust, or under the planet's crust, and wait things out until it gets better.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, Imperial Man likes to go mining for stuff and waking up and digging deep and all this shit. So then all of a sudden you have like they're mining, and all of a sudden they go into this like tomb that's like hundreds of miles deep below the crust, and they're like, huh, what's this? And what happens when that is breached is the Necrons wake up and kill everything on the planet. And normally they'd go back into stasis and seal everything up, but a lot of times they don't. And then they just go and...
They're popping up now.
Yeah, they're popping up like popcorn on a pan.
Yeah, and they're starting to be like, you know what? I was watching from the sidelines. I'm going to get involved now. Very famously...
so what's interesting is a lot of these Xenos factions is typically... the Imperium would be like, no, purge the Xenos. But these smarter factions that recognize the problem that the Tyranids bring. So some recent developments have been that people like the Tau, the Necrons, the Eldar are like, hey, these Tyranids are pretty bad. Can we do something about this? And then Empire's like, I don't like it. I don't trust you. But yeah, I hate these bugs, so sure. They've even aligned with the orcs a couple times, which is wild.
Yeah, it's heavily inferred that Yvrain and the Inari are responsible for reviving Rabute, and it's heavily inferred that Khal used Necron tech to make the Primaris and new weaponry. Yeah, and so it's like at some point the blind
the regeneration thing definitely
blind semi-religious hatred that we use to maintain the Imperium after the heresy needs to be amended to keep us alive.
It's a wild time in 40k, and it just keeps getting wilder.
Primarchs are coming back.
It's always going to be grimdark, but at the same time there's still a little tiny teensy weensy little bit of hope.
Things are
everything's bad, but it might get better.
But don't you want it to be bad together? we can all complain about the grimdark together. And
which is what's the fun of 40k. With that, I think that's all. We covered all the Xenos. We got through them. We finished the Xenos factions. Like the main ones. Obviously, there's ones that show up in the books, but
At this point, I could be like, what about? Other than that, we're good.
yeah. I guess the last thing we'll have to talk about. I mean, we have to talk about the human factions eventually, but we can talk about that another hot time. We can talk about that, and then we can talk about the mutants. But for now, I think that's our end of our Xenos episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll catch you back again on Thursday. We're going to continue our D&D campaign. Sorry for the abrupt not doing it. One of our members our DM had some personal stuff and he couldn't go, or it couldn't show up, so we decided to skip the episode this week, and we'll be back with it on Thursday. And then other than that, we'll be doing The Portrait of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde next week, and we'll do some spooky season episodes where we talk about some cryptids after that. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you again later.